facelift i30 DCT in for our stage 1 package. Just going to run through everything that we do as a stage 1 as at least the first line of modifications for these cars. So first up, we've got the pitch mounts, replacing of the stock one, so this helps to eliminate majority of that wheel hop. You do get an increase in NVH in the car, but the pros outweighs the cons here. You get a lot more traction down off the line. Next up, we've got a replacement in the HKS spark plugs. So we use MR45XLZs in our stage 1 package. Good, strong, reliable spark that you require when especially tuning these. This customer's opted to actually upgrade his blow valve to the response. We offer this kit in the GFB Mach2, which is just a factory replacement of it, but full metal body. He's now getting the full adjustability of the response, being able to change how much vents, how much recircs. A lot of customers like the response just because of the adjustability of it. And to top it all off, we've got xForce's 4-inch catted downpipe. So we'll throw this one on. We also utilize a patch loom for the secondary O2. Here at Cherry, we will not put a defouler on it. Simply, it's giving inaccurate data to the ECU. ECU doesn't know what it's getting. We'd rather put this in instead, give the ECU accurate data, be able to do an accurate and reliable tune instead of tricking it, essentially. So join us along as we dive into this one. Airbox is out, recirc hose off the blow valve is off. We've undone the charge pipe there, so including our vacuum reference, map sensor connector, and solenoid connector as well. So to take the charge pipe off, all we have to do is undo the actual bottom hose connector as well, the intercooler. That'll come off through the bottom. Getting out the top, primary O2 out, secondary O2 disconnected, all the heat shields off as well. Car will go up, wheels will come off, subframe will be out, and hopefully the downpipe jumps out. Hopefully. Like it's up. Fitted. So this is our O2 loom. So with the patch harness that we've got here, we're able to actually just extend the loom just enough that we can get it back up into the factory position. Up alongside, we'll go up behind the heat shield up here, tuck it behind the AC lines as well, and then click it back into where the factory loom would normally be. This way, we're not giving false information. It's in the nice, accurate spot that it should be to get the information that it requires, and really nice for tuning as well.
Alright guys, so the team upstairs has finished installing all of the mods on this i30N for us to do the stage 1 kit on. I just wanted to talk to you guys about what we would generally expect from our CT500 package, which is kind of what most people would refer to as a stage 1 for an i30N. I'm just showing here the typical power and torque figures that we would expect from a facelift DCT i30N. Generally stock figures, it does depend on the car and the day, but generally stock figures are in the range of between, I mean, if I'm honest, I've seen almost as high as 195, but usually they're kind of between 175, 185, something like that. And then with our CT500 package, we generally expect around the 215, 220 kilowatt mark. So these are runs from another car just so that we can do this example here for you, and then we'll run the car up on the dyno and I'll apply the tune file to it. and then we'll give you the final result so you'll be able to see what that is. So I just want to talk on some of the main points in terms of how we do our tunes and my methodology and my approach to tuning cars. It is a little bit different to what I've seen from other tuning places. For me, the ECU works on a airflow and a torque model structure, essentially. So everything that happens inside your car, whether it's applying the throttle, traction control, compensation for taking off up a hill, everything basically, all of that is correlated and linked back to the torque model. If your torque model is not scaled or set up properly, it causes problems. And back when we only had manual i30Ns, it was less of an issue because you can have incorrect torque, and other than maybe some slight drivability issues, throttle response being a bit, like a light switch almost, or maybe your traction control was like super aggressive when it cut in, it like really killed the power instead of actually just pulling it back a little bit. But aside from that, those were kind of the only problems. Once we had cars starting to come out with DCT gearboxes, that's when we started seeing more issues. The biggest problem with the DCT gearbox in these cars, and this is going to be the case until we do finally get through doing all the gearbox tuning that I am working on currently, but they are limited from the TCU side. So the gearbox controller has a limiter inside of it that's a torque value limiter. It feeds that into the ECU and says you can't go past this number. So the way that I've seen people get around that is by not changing any of the torque values and then under-reporting torque. So increasing boost, increasing timing, changing fuel, doing all that sort of stuff. But then the ECU still thinks that it's only making 450 newton meters, which if your car's not making 450 and it's making 550 or 600 newton meters, and you're feeding that into a gearbox that you're then telling is only making 450 newton meters, you can see why that would be a problem, and you can see why people are starting to get issues with clutch slip on their cars. So one of the things that I focus on when I tune these cars, I really want to make sure that everything is rescaled and set up properly, all the torque modeling is done properly, and then that means the ECU is reporting correct to the gearbox. The gearbox, when it requests its limit, is maintained properly by the ECU, and that gives us so much linearity, so much flexibility. It allows me to have boost being tapered in automatically by the ECU. When we have a larger turbo, it can come in at 22, taper to 27, and it's done automatically by the ECU because it uses that airflow and torque model. So even on this entry level stage, this CT500 stage that we have here, I am still increasing those limiters. The factory torque limiters at peak are about 480 newton meters, and they do taper down either side of that. I think as low as maybe 420 or so at Redline. The bigger problem, I suppose, is that with the way that the scaling is done in the ECU, it's not just an airflow to torque lookup, it's also a torque to airflow lookup. The airflow tables are quite limited, and the maximum values in those tables are lower than the maximum torque values, which means you can't actually achieve maximum torque on the factory file without modifying that structure. So that's one of the main things. That's been thousands of hours of my time recalibrating, remodeling and restructuring all of the torque, and that allows us to do things like torque by gear. We get tapered boost by managing torque instead of by tricking the car by lying to it about what boost pressure it's supposed to make. Our traction control, generally speaking, is much smoother and linear. Throttle response is smoother and linear. So when I tune a car, unless I'm requested to otherwise by the customer, in terms of a pyramid structure of what's the most important thing, for me, it's drivability. When you tune your car, you're doing that because you want more drivability out of it. Of course, you want it faster, but to my thinking, you don't want to sacrifice your drivability to make your car faster. That doesn't make sense. So when I tune a car, I do focus primarily on drivability, and if that means that ultimately I don't make as much peak power or as peak torque as other tuning shops, I don't really care. If the tunes do drive drastically better, then that's a win. That's all that matters. So the numbers might not be potentially as high as other dynos that you might have seen, which is a whole different kettle of fish, and I'm going to get into that with another video later. But at the end of the day, how it drives is the most important thing, and that's my key focus when I tune the cars. I'll go through quickly a few other things that we've done with this tune as well, this CT500 tune. We do raise the RPM limiter in the ECU. We raised the RPM limiter up to 7,000 RPM, actually a little bit over 7,000, so I think it's 7,040 RPM. Doing that means that the gearbox is forcing an upshift at just before 7,000 RPM, which means as you rev it out, even in manual mode, even when you rev it out and it gets to 7,000 RPM, the gearbox forces a shift, the ECU doesn't hit a limiter. That means you're shifting at 7,000 at maximum possible power and torque because the ECU is not trying to pull anything to compensate for approaching a rev limiter. The gearbox is essentially forcing the shift and the ECU compensates from that being forced. So by doing that, yes, you do lose your being able to bounce off the limiter, which frankly is not great for the car anyway, but in return, you get a car that goes to 7,000 RPM and then just really smashes into the next gear. It's much more aggressive doing it that way. Given our CT500 kits for the i30Ns have downpipes installed, I've also applied compensation for the downpipe. This means that I've allowed for the fact that the catalytic converter is less efficient as far as emissions is concerned. So that's changing some of the DTC lookup values, changing some of the codes so that it doesn't throw codes for the downpipe being modified. But there's also other things that need to be taken into account with downpipe compensation. There's lots of tables in the ECU that reference the amount of back pressure inside the downpipe. There's lots of tables that reference catalytic efficiency. There's lots of tables that modify boost pressure, for example, based on how much back pressure it's expecting from the downpipe. Again, because I'm trying to work towards linearity and as close as I can get it, perfect drivability, all of that is correctly changed, modified, and set up to reflect the changes that we've made to the car with the downpipe. We have changed some fuel targets. That's common practice for when you're tuning a car. We do actually richen it up a little bit down low. Direct injection cars do love to run really, really lean, and they don't need a lot of fuel to maintain some level of knock resistance. I know that Golf R's, for example, will run basically 14.7 to 1 unless they get really, really hot, and even that's under full boost and everything, which is kind of crazy to me. So we do richen them up a little bit down low, only a little bit, and then we do lean them out up top. Leaning them out does theoretically make them run a little bit hotter, but that's also one of the key ways that you make power. You don't want to just flood the cylinders with heaps of fuel. Sure, it's great for cooling everything down, but it's going to ultimately rob you of power. So I tend to target a richer number than some other tuners that I've seen, because I think it is still safer to leave some fuel in there, but we don't need these cars just running crazy, crazy rich. It's better just to get it more to a normal level. The changes that I make to the torque structure also flows over into all of the temperature-based corrections. So there's 3 temperature corrections in the ECU. There's a coolant temperature, an oil temperature, and intake air temperature correction value. Those are applied to the target torque values, and all of those are scaled but not turned off. So if your coolant temperature goes through the roof, your oil temperature goes crazy, or you're driving around and it's a 50-degree day and you're getting 70-degree intake temps, your car will compensate for that and will actively pull the torque values down. Being a torque model, less torque value means less air demand ultimately means less boost pressure. The car will make less power, but it's a lot safer doing it that way. So we leave as much protection as we can turned on in the car, because that's really the best way, in our opinion, to do it. You want to leave as much protection as you can while still giving the best ultimate outcome. So that's one of the things that we do. The ignition timing in the car is updated to reflect the fact these tunes are being set up for 98 octane fuel. The difference between 95 octane and 98 octane in terms of knock resistance, at least from my experience on the dyno, is notable. Not massive, but notable, and enough to pick up an extra 10 or 15 kilowatts. We can tune i30Ns on 95. I would personally recommend, if you are going to tune a car, if you're not wanting to do it on 98 because you're wanting to save some money on fuel, seems a little silly, but if that's what you want to do, that's perfectly fine. I would recommend, and it's controversial, tuning it for E10. E10 is already 94 octane. It's slightly less energy dense, just like E85 is, so a tiny bit more goes in, which does help with cooling. And it's like drastically cheaper than any other fuel. So as long as you're getting good quality E10, I would be tuning a car on either E10 or 98. I wouldn't bother with anything else in between. Personally, I don't see any point. And I've tuned a lot of cars on E10 and they've all worked perfectly well. So there's no reason to not do that. I think it's a bit of a thing with people getting freaked out about E10 being bad for the car. It's just not. If E85's amazing, E10 is 10% of E85. So anyway. In terms of the pressure request for the car, the pressure request targets for this car have been raised to 2.35 bar absolute. All of the pressure lookup, all the pressure demands, pressure requests, everything that the car does in regards to how much boost pressure it's trying to make with the turbocharger is all done as an absolute value. That means when you drive up in altitude and your ambient pressure goes down, or you go down to sea level, or it's really, really hot or really, really cold, and those factors are changing, your car should, in theory at least, make the same power all the time because it's targeting a specific absolute value. You can get a bit caught out if you're targeting a higher absolute value and you're also having a car that's being driven at high altitude, because you end up having a car that has to target a high boost pressure above ambient, and that's theoretically problematic. There's one boost pressure limiter table that's a value set at assume ambient is this value, and values of this much above that are considered overboost, and the car will go into an overboost protection. Those are modified in the tune, they have to be, obviously. I try to leave them as low as reasonably possible, but I also need to give some headroom for the car. If this person goes driving in the mountains, for example, we want them to have all of the power still without the car just completely going into limp mode. So that's how that works. Generally speaking, at sea level, a 2.35 bar absolute pressure, for all intents and purposes, atmospheric pressure is 1 bar. So you just take 1 off that value. So we're looking at about a 1.35 bar boost target. That is a guideline for the ECU. It's not a hard and fast, like it doesn't go to that value and hold that value. It uses that value to determine where it should be based on the kind of maximum load values that you've set up. But at the end of the day, being a torque and airflow modeled ECU, it uses the airflow models to determine how much boost that you're going to run. I have multiple times changed the pressure demand or the pressure request tables by values of up to 2 or 3 psi and seeing no change at all on the dyno, unless I go really, really high, or I start messing around with offset scaling, which is basically saying to the car, when you want to make 20 pounds, then target 24 pounds. That's a very common thing that a lot of tuners do with a lot of cars. Very common in VAG cars. I see a lot with other tuners with these cars. Personally, I don't agree with that approach. I think you should be telling the car, if you want 25, make 25, and then using your airflow model to scale that properly. But I don't see that happening a lot. That's just, again, another thing about how I approach tuning versus how other people approach tuning. I just think it's important to let the ECU do what it wants to do. Give it some parameters, give it some new parameters, some higher parameters, and the ability to make power, and it does make power at the end of the day. So I prefer to let the ECU be an ECU. It's a computer, let it do computer things. There's no point trying to force it or trick it into doing anything if you can avoid doing that. On the point of pressure request, I have disabled overboost in the CT500 packages. When we're already targeting a higher boost value, you don't also want to add more boost with the overboost function as well. I'd rather the car just make the boost pressure that I want it to make when it's being, when it's under a condition where it's trying to make a certain amount of boost, it should just make what I want it to make. So I just disable overboost. Could I leave it turned on? Yeah, I could. You can request that if you want to. We do offer the ability to do a stage package with some options. If you want to do overboost turned on because occasionally you want a bit of extra boost and you're not too worried about intake temps or whatever it is, then we can leave it turned on, but generally speaking, that's just turned off as part of the package. And then as a final point, talking about the boost pressure, and again, another thing that I've spent a lot of time working on because it did really need a lot of work, the wastegate strategy that's used in the facelift ECUs is not very good. And I say that, I'm not trying to talk smack about Hyundai or their tuning department or anything like that. I don't know whether they originally set up the car for a larger turbo and then they got stuck with a smaller turbo from some financial reason or otherwise, or they tuned the car for the smaller turbo, put a larger turbo on it, and then didn't really retune the car properly for the larger turbo, because a lot of the maps that are related to turbine compressor efficiency and airflow through the turbo, most of them are untouched. There's no changes to variable valve timing between the pre and post facelift. It's kind of crazy to me that there's so much scope that could have been touched by changing the turbocharger that hasn't been looked into, but it just hasn't been done. The problem that we see with facelift cars is that the way that they've managed their boost structure with the facelift being a bigger turbo, essentially they've just strengthened the PID structure for the car. Without going into huge amounts of detail, PID is essentially the correction or the after control. So you have a pre-control, which is saying when you make boost go to this value, and then it goes there, and then you have an after control, the PID structure, and then that says, oh, you're here, but you're missing it by X amount, just move the values around. The structure, the PID structure for the facelift cars, even on a stock tune, if you put an intake on your car, you might even hear it make that like kind of like wavy noise as it comes onto boost. That's just the PID structure being too strong and fighting itself. When you start turning the boost up and you give the car some more exhaust flow, that just starts getting worse. So I did spend a lot of time working on wastegate strategy. I did remodel the entire PID structure for the ECU because it really needed it. And now I find that I'm getting the boost coming on really, really linear. I don't get any of that wavy, noise, that kind of jerky feeling as the car comes onto boost. All of that's just been cleaned up completely. And ultimately what pushed me into doing that was when I started tuning for our big hybrid turbos. Obviously they're a much bigger turbo, so the structure really does need to be completely overhauled. It has to be completely different. But then that kind of opened the gates for me looking into, well, it still does it on the stock facelift turbo, maybe I should look into it. And then I spent 300 or 400 hours working on that. So at the end of the day, a lot of time and effort, a lot of development has gone into these tunes. The CT500 tune has been pretty much 2.5, almost 3 years in the making. I had been previously reluctant to release something that was a pre-made packaged tune, but I now have a lot more confidence in not just my own understanding of the ECU, but I also have a lot more confidence in the ECU itself, and knowing that if it's set up the right way and set up the way well, in my opinion, the right way, if you set it up a specific way, you can have one file that will run in multiple cars. Anyone who says otherwise is mistaken, because the factory ECU files, there's 50,000, 100,000 cars running identical ECU files. So if the factory can do it with a factory file, tuners can do it with tune files too. It just takes a lot of time, effort, and development, and hopefully that's kind of where we've got to now. So just as a last point before I do get this car on the dyno and I run it up, this customer on his car has requested a couple of options as well. He does want his idle increased, but only a little bit. So I'm going to bump the idle by about 25 RPM. That should just take the edge off a little bit with the vibration from the engine pitch mount. It doesn't sound like a lot, but when you talk about an idle being at 700 RPM, going from 700 to 725, you can feel that difference. And it does take that edge off the pitch mount. We do range the amount of idle change that we do by a little bit, but just depends on what the person wants. Not everyone wants their car idling at 1000 RPM in N mode, so we do change that how the customer wants to. And finally, this customer has requested a modification to the pop file for his car. The pop mods that we offer for the i30N cars, if you do go down the path of selecting options for your tune, or if you wanted to go down the path of a full custom tune, we have a scale of 1 to 5. 1 is we've reduced the pops. If you have a car that you're installing a downpipe on and you like the pops when it's stock, the pops get louder from the downpipe. You may want to reduce your pops back to pre-downpipe levels. That's what option 1 out of 5 is. 2 out of 5 is completely stock. We don't touch the pops at all. 3 out of 5, which is what this customer is going for. Essentially, I clean up the pop file. So I make it more consistent. It will pop more frequently. It'll pop across a little bit wider of a rev range, and I slightly lengthen it. So it's about 25% longer, which sounds heaps, but we're talking about going from 0.5 to 0.6 seconds, so not a lot. And in terms of the value that you would refer to the pop value, it's actually just the amount of ignition timing that's being pulled from the car. I'm increasing that, or decreasing it, I guess, from 14 to 16. So it's a small change. When someone wants to go up to like a 4 out of 5, which is when they're like, I really want this car to pop pretty loud, but I still have a catted downpipe, don't blow my downpipe out of my car. Those numbers can go up from 16 to sort of 18, 20. Anything above that, maybe a little bit sketchy for something with a downpipe still, but those numbers can get a lot larger. So that is a small jump on the 3 out of 5. 4 out of 5, as I said, that's, make my car pop more or less as much as it can with still having a cat in it. And a 5 out of 5 is I just want to piss off my neighbors and my family and everyone that is anywhere near me at any time, and hopefully I throw some flames out the back of my car. 5 out of 5 obviously is just like a completely send it, it'll pop pretty much all the time. And if you like really do want the 5 out of 5 experience, we can make it pop in all modes, so it's not just N mode. So that's something that we can do as well. I guess that's kind of the benefit of going down the path of a full custom tune. If that is something that you wanted to do, we can discuss what you want to get out of your car. When I tune the car, it's tuned how you want the car to be tuned. I'm obviously here to guide you and to suggest to you the best way to do things, or the way that I would suggest to do things. But at the end of the day, it's your car. You're the one who has to drive it every day. You need to be happy with the car. And that's my job. My job is to work with you, not force something that I want onto you or make you have something that maybe you're not even sure about. So anyway, let's actually get this car strapped up on the dyno now. I'll put it up on the dyno. I'll do a couple of runs. We'll do some stock runs. We'll load the file in and confirm everything's fine. We can check it on the logs and everything like that. If you're buying a staged kit, this CT500 kit, this tune has been tested now across quite a few cars, and it's been the same tune in different cars for the purposes of testing. The customers that have come in have ultimately been requesting custom tunes, so the tunes have been updated after that point. But for every car that's come in, I've always tested a staged tune first, confirmed it is where I want it to be for a staged tune, and then taken it past that to a point of custom tuning. So when you come in and you get a stage 1 or a CT500 kit for your car, you're not going to get a dyno sheet. We don't put your car on the dyno. We're going to load a file into your ECU that we are sure is going to work, and we're very confident, and we've tested it a number of times. And obviously, if there's any problems, we will fix it free of charge. That's not the problem. But yeah, the entry-level price for the CT500 is basically buying a tune file and having us load it into the car, or otherwise we can go down the path of a full custom tune. And if we do that, then obviously it goes on the dyno and probably spends a couple of hours here. So anyway, that's enough talking for now. Let's get the car on the dyno and we'll run it up. Next time you see me, I'll be showing you some numbers. So I'm done. I've loaded the file and confirmed it in the car. This car actually did make a little bit more. So I was saying before that we expect them to, vary depending on the car, depends on the day, how they're strapped, what the weather's like, if it's super hot or super cold or really humid, or there's a lot of factors that go into what numbers a car makes on the dyno. So it's really never going to be a like for like if it's different days, different dynos, different strapping, different tires, different air pressure. It's a lot. So I think it actually made slightly less power than the example that we had up before when it was untuned, but then it made slightly more. I think we were about 7-ish kilowatts more than the standard stage 1 or CT500 package. So yeah, look, ultimately it's a good outcome. The customer's car's gone. He had to get out of here, so I've had to rush it off the dyno to get him out. But yeah, the outcome's good. The customer's really happy with it, and he's already talking about coming back and doing the next stage. So hopefully he enjoys his extra torque and power for the next couple of weeks or months at least, and then we might see him back in the future. So if you've got any questions about how we approach tuning, if you've got any tuning specific related questions, if you want us to do any videos related to any kind of aspect of tuning, if you want me to elaborate more on some of the points that I mentioned earlier in the video, let us know. I do have some plans for doing some tuning videos, but we'd love to get your feedback about what you're looking to see or what you think would be good to get out of us for this sort of stuff. So that was a brief overview of doing a stage tune on a customer's car, and now we're updating it now that we're offering these pre-made tunes that we have a lot more confidence in with all the hours, thousands of hours of development in them. We're also now offering these packages at a lot lower price, and when you do want to go down the path of a custom tune, the price is higher. So that's us basically doing what we can to give you guys the best possible deal, and you are going to get repeatable numbers on pretty much any dyno, any day of the week, and it should always be lovely, linear and smooth like this one here. So that's going to be all from me. We'll chat to you guys later, and yeah, let us know if there's anything else you want. Cheers.